Afternoon, everybody. Today we're going to do a little revision and then show you a couple of things you can do when you can do your different stitches, knitting and purling stitches. And then we're going to show you how to cast off, because when you finish knitting, you have to learn how to cast off the stitches. So I'm knitting now. I'm hoping that everybody has learned the method of casting on. There are several ways, and each one will, whichever is easiest for you, you just do it. There's no right or wrong for casting on. So when you cast on, the first stitch that we showed you was a knitting stitch. So I've got some knitting on my needle, and I'm just going to go over the knitting stitch with everybody again. You have your two needles, you have your wool going away from you, and you have a row with most of your stitches on. And so you're going to take your needle in your right hand and put it in the back of the first stitch on your left hand needle. You put it through it, you get a little cross, and then you take this wool and you wrap it around the needle and pull it tight, and then you take your right hand needle, pull it back just far enough so that you've got the cross behind the left hand stitch on the left hand needle, and push it up. Just my iPad. Oh, sorry, I've lost my picture.
There you go.
Sorry, I lost myself. So we do that one more time. You remember you have to have your wool away from you, away from the, oh good, now there's a big picture. And so then you take your needle in your right hand and you put it in the first stitch on the left hand needle, and then you put it through and you get a cross like that. Then you take the wool and you wrap it around the needle, and then you pull the right hand needle slowly back just until it's behind that needle there. Hold the wool tight, and then you just push that stitch away. Then you do the same again. You take your right hand needle, you put it into the stitch like that, you get a little cross like that. Then you take this wool and you wrap it around. Then you pull it back very slowly until it's just behind this stitch. Then you say goodbye. And that is a knit stitch. So let's try it one more time. It's very easy once you get the, what do you say, the hang of it. Through, little cross, wrap that wool around, pull that needle back slowly, just keep it behind and then push it up. Just put it in the back. It's very important on this one that you do take your needle and put it in the back of the stitch. Round the needle, pull back, and then push off the stitch. Round, pull back, push off the stitch. Wrap around, pull back, push off the stitch. Now I'm going to hope that you all have been practicing and you know how to do that knit stitch. Now I'm going to knit to the end of the row. That's what we call it. We're knitting different rows of stitches. And I'm going to then show you the purl stitch. Through, remember, make the cross, put the wool around, and then pull and push off. Push off. Around. I think everybody who's with us can do the knit stitch, correct? Caroline and Jolie and
Yep.
James.
Correct.
Everybody's got that one. Oh,
yes.
So that is our knit row. And now we're going to do our purl row. So is everybody ready to start the next row? I'm waiting for you all
Almost
to
there.
finish.
Almost.
Almost, okay.
Almost there.
Slowly finish that row, yes. This wool that I'm knitting is a little bit thin, I think, for these big needles, but I think you can see better on a big needle.
Yeah, these are very nice. These needles work really well with this.
And they're like slick also, so they're nice. Like it kind of just comes right off
It comes off, yeah.
easily.
I'm just
Good.
almost done with my knitting row, and then we're moving on to the.
Right, so I mean, really, there's only two different rows for knitting. One is called the knit row and the other one is called the purl row. And it's all to do with the way you put your needle, where the wool is and where you put your needle on to knit them off. And that's the only thing that you have to do differently. Just tell me when you've finished. Are we all ready to go on pearls?
Ready to go on
Good.
pearls.
Well, pearls is a little different because you have to have your wool at the other side. Before you had your wool over here. This time you need your wool more over this way.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just keeping it straight in front of me for the first stitch. But the difference here is when you're doing this stitch, you have to go into the front of the needle. The last time you went, as it were, into the other side of the needle. I call that the back of the needle. But this time you have to go in the front, and the wool has got to be towards your body. And then you have to wrap it around the needle again. And then you pull and put the stitch off. So you put your needles in the front of the stitch. Then you wrap the wool around, pull it out and off. You can almost pull it all the way out into the front of the stitch. Now the wool is at the front of your knitting. Now it's easier to see, I think, when you've done a couple of stitches. The wool is in front, facing you. Okay, so that's important. So then you need to put your needle in the front of the stitch. And then you have to wrap your wool around. It's a little bit more, I think it's a little more awkward to do it. I'm not sure, it's me. So again, put it in the front and then wrap the wool around. I'm having, okay, let me see. Then wrap the wool around and pull it there.
Yeah, when you practice, it gets a lot easier. Like
I'm going to try and keep my wool sort of around my finger here. I think that might be easier.
Mm-hmm.
But it's in front of me and I've wrapped it sort of over the top of that.
Julie, yours looks so good. I love it.
Then we go in the front of the stitch and then we wrap the wool around. And if you see, you're sort of wrapping the wool around the front of your, facing you. And then you wrap it, I don't know, it's hard to see, around, and then put it behind the stitch, as it were, and pull it back to you. And then you just pull it out. Let's see. Oh, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So if you do keep it on, I think it is easier if you sort of keep, the wool is at the front, but you can sort of keep it around your finger or something, and then
that's what I kind of just hold on to it, and then because I like to make my
then it's easier, isn't it? Because you kind of can control it better. Otherwise,
you just kind
then
of
we go in the front of the stitch, keep everything in front, and then you wrap the wool around and then pull it off. Just you put it in the front, then take your wool and it'll sort of just go over behind the stitch you're going to take off and then put it around. Trying to leave enough space, then sort of take it and put it over the needle and then bring it around. Is that the way you do it, James?
Do what? Purling?
Pearl stitches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
James,
the
can we see what you have?
Yeah. So I only had like 5 rows at the beginning, so I've just been trying to go fast so I can cast off.
Looks
Okay,
great.
yeah. So you've got a stock, that's 1 row knit, 1 row pearl, right? That you're
Yep.
doing now.
Yeah, that's
And then
exactly
you-
the same with me.
So you can do all knitting, rows that are all knitting, and then you're going to have something that looks like this, or you can do all purling. And if you do all knitting, it'll look like this. And if you do all purling, it'll also look like this.
Mm.
So that's why this idea is that you do 1 row knitting and then 1 row purl, so that you have one side that looks like this. It's kind of smooth. And then you have this side. This is your purl side, which is more like this one. What do you call it, James? You have a good word for it. What did you call this side? What it looked like?
The ugly
The
side.
ugly side.
Ugly side, right? This is the ugly side, and this is what the pretty side. But you can see it's quite different. So this is the side that you knit, and then this is the side that you purl. So you get this design.
Yeah.
A lot of people like, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, I think you can do all knitting, especially for squares or for short blankets. If you have thick wool, it looks really quite nice just doing, the one and getting all. So we'll adjust one more time for the purl. Just make sure your wool is going to the front of your body, and then I'm just holding it up in my fingers. Then put your needle in the front, wrap it around, and take off the stitch.
Because I remember last class, James said to write down so you remember which way that it helps you. For me, since I've been knitting like a lot, trying to figure out purling, what helps for me is I just always end with purling, so that I always start with knitting, if that helps.
Yeah. Oh, good. Because this is the really. Earlier on, I was thinking that you do the opposite when you end with a purl stitch and you and start the next row. Then you start with the knit stitch, right?
Yeah.
And
That
then
just helps me see it.
then it works right. Now this is another
If this is like purling, you knit.
possibility when you can do.
Yeah, I did that as well.
This is called ribbing, and I don't know that it's really. This is when you can do your knitting and your purl. And then what you do is you do 1 stitch knitting and 1 stitch purling. And you can see, if you look carefully, these smooth ones will be all your knitting rows. And then in between, there's all the purling rows.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's also pretty cool.
And that's called ribbing, because actually, if you look at it, it stretches. It will stretch. So if you have sweaters and things, very often there will be this kind of knitting on the, at the bottom of it, and on the cuffs of your sleeves. And so that's called ribbing. And I think you can see pretty clearly there when I pull it, can't you? Like a knit stitch and a purl stitch. Then you've got the ugly stitch and the pretty stitch next to each other. And it's exactly the same on both sides.
Yeah, I'm starting to knit a scarf, and it looks like that.
Mm-hmm. It's fun. I mean, you can play around with your knitting and purl stitches, so that you can end up with other combination. And this one I showed you last week, that's doing the same thing, but you like this one, you have every row you do the same. So you do all knitting or all purling, and that's what you get. Now this one looks like this. It's called, in America, it's called a seed stitch. Mm-hmm. And what you're doing to this one, you do, let's say the first row you do knit, purl, like the ribbing. And then when you turn it around and do the next row, where you did a knit stitch, you do a purl stitch. Where you did a purl stitch, you do a knit stitch. And you end up with this very pretty pattern. And it's just, you know, doing exactly the same stitches in a different order, would you say? And that's quite pretty. And I checked on it, and its name is a seed stitch.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I mean, once you can feel confident doing knit and purl, then, you know, you can do all sorts of little combinations. And it looks, you know, rather pretty. So there is one thing that you do need to know. You've done rows and rows and rows of knitting, but you have to learn how to cast off. The two important things in knitting are knowing how to cast on and how to cast off. Otherwise, your scarf will stretch from here to Aventura or something. So I think, is it about time that we look at casting off?
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's pretty easy to cast off. It's easier to cast off, I think, than it is to cast on, actually. But once you know how, the rhythm, as it were, it's pretty easy. So you start, you've got your row of stitches, and you've knitted enough, and so you need to cast off. So you have to knit the first stitch, and then you knit the second stitch. So you have 2 stitches on your needle. You take the first stitch, so you take the point of the needle with all the stitches on in your left hand, put it through the first stitch on your right hand needle, and then you have to pull it over the stitch. And that's gone. Now you've only got 1 stitch. So then you knit another stitch. So you stitch, you take your left hand needle, put it in the first stitch, and then you take it over the top of the other stitch. There you go. So you've cast off 2, and then you've got 1 left. So then you knit another one, and that is how you cast off. And then you go into the first one and take it over the top, and that's cast off. And then you just go on that way, and then you will cast off all your stitches. So you just knit, have 2 on your needle, take the first one and take it over the top. And there it is. So you're sort of knitting a little row of stitches. So you knit in again and take the first stitch and just take it over the top. Is everybody happy with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Good. And you just take it over the top, and there you are. And then you just knit them off to be just 2 stitches, 1 at a time, and then you just take 1 over the top, and you knit the next one on, and take the stitch over the top. I think it's very easy to cast off.
Seems pretty easy.
I've knit a little dolly scarf. Some people, amazing people knit, like, I remember one time people knitting scarecrows and all those cute little teddy bears and patterns for that. And those were kind of sweet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all kinds of things that we think of as like stuffed animals can be knit, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They're adorable.
Yeah, I had this one friend who knitted at school with me, and she was really good. She would knit stuffed animals.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
She would make 1 limb at a time and then sew them together.
Didn't Teresa do that for a while, James?
I think she did it with shirts.
Oh, yeah.
I think she sewed shirts.
Oh, she did embroidery.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, mine is way too small for me now. It's probably gone.
I did a little one time, I think, you know, like I knit a baby blanket, and then there was a little blue I got, patterns. You don't see a lot of good patterns like in Michael's, but I guess you can go online, but if it's just a shop that sells only wool, then they'll often have, quite complicated patterns for different things. They're not that difficult to knit. They just take a while.
Yeah.
And like you said, James, you have to count your stitches carefully.
Yep.
Hats are good knitting. It's not so much here, but hats. I used to love knitting fun hats. There were lots of fun patterns for my little granddaughter when she lived, she lived in Tennessee, so it got cold in the winter. And those were fun, like, get a pattern and knit a hat.
Well,
and sometimes over enough. I think they're all doing pretty well. Just remember 2 stitches at a time, and you take the first one and just take it over, and there you go.
it's kind of a trend right now. So maybe everyone that people are knitting these this jacket that's like different patches of colors. That
Oh, really?
Yeah, that this famous singer Harry Styles.
Right. Oh, right.
But it's like everyone who's like they just took up knitting now because like they want to make the jacket, but it's kind of easy. It's like just like normal patches and then just
Oh, clever. Oh, I
Yeah.
like that.
But now people are taking up knitting now to make that. So
Valerie may know who Harry
wonderful.
Styles is.
Actually,
You know who Harry Styles is. They're both British.
right. Yes, Harry's quite a character. I was reading about him in Italy or something the other day. He was out.
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah.
He has quite a following. The other guys, what were they? The One Direction? Was that their
Yeah.
name? Well, the other 4 guys have kind of disappeared, but Harry's still going.
They're all pretty popular now, but he's
Not as
probably the one doing the best out of all of them.
Yeah.
But thinking about what is happening at the moment with limitations on, spending your time, knitting is probably a pretty good thing to do because it's quite calming, actually, isn't it? And you are creating something, and you have something to show when you finish. So I think it now that people have a little bit more time, maybe it would be good.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting, though. I like that, knitting patches and just sewing. Well, we've got a good start. I could make one already. I think.
Yeah, the designer who made the actual jacket has actually released like a template for you to like follow it and like the yarn. It's like purling, like also like purling and like like sometimes you can take other yarns and like put it in there.
Yeah.
Like black and orange, for example.
If he's really made it simple, the only thing is like, does it have sleeves, or is it just?
Yeah, it does have sleeves, but like I think maybe it's hard. Like a lot of people probably have to redo it, but it's just generally just like a lot of square patches. Like,
I'm going to, but if everybody, just did one, they would be more fun if they all looked original, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but then also like people kind of make it their own also because not everyone's as talented as some other knitters, so like some look a little different than others, and some people
that makes it more fun. Yeah,
color, so it's kind of.
So I'm going to show you. I've got 1 stitch left.
Because that's a great way for him to make some money, making those Harry Styles jackets and selling them.
Yeah,
No,
maybe
people are selling them and they're pretty expensive.
You can sell them to little fangirls that have a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, I know a fangirl. She does not have a lot of money, but I know I live with a fangirl.
I think, it's kind of interesting because it's like justifying the fact that you have to, spend money on these certain things. My grandson is very funny about justifying buying shoes. That's a big thing. Okay, I have 1 stitch left. I've cut off my wool, and then you take the wool and you just thread it through that needle, that stitch, and then you just pull it tight, and there you have your piece is cast off. I think casting off is quite easy, don't you?
Yeah, I think casting off used to be much easier than casting on for me.
Mhm.
Much easier, definitely. Yeah. So
Can I see
the
yours,
first
Jane?
thing you need for knitting is 2 needles and a
Want me
ball
to-
of wool.
You want me to cast off?
Yeah.
Here, we'll do the flip
Well,
around.
you can go on knitting now if you want, James. You can knit it into a square because I
Well,
think,
it's
you know,
fine. I have the scarf that I'm knitting as well, so it's not like I need to have this project as well.
Okay.
Moving the
So hopefully we have some of you people who've been watching us have the pleasure of knitting now. And if you'd like to knit us some little squares, and then maybe send a message to the church, if you can knit some little squares, we can put them together and make a coat or a blanket. We better make a blanket, right?
Okay, so like she said, when you cast off, you want to knit 2.
Right. That's good. We can see. That's good that you've got different colored needles. That shows a
And
good.
then
Yeah.
once you've knit 2,
Yep.
you grab the bottom one.
Right.
You grab the bottom one and you pull it off while keeping the top one on, and that's 1. And then
Right.
you knit 1 again. You grab the bottom one and you bring it off the needle while keeping your hoop on. And then you just repeat that until the very end. And then what she does is she puts what Valerie does is she puts the yarn through the last stitch. What I do is I just cut it and pull it off, but hers is probably a lot better.
Really? I'm to watch and see how you do that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, we hope we'll have some people will be challenged into becoming knitters.
Yeah, totally.
Lots of, yeah. I don't know if it's, I mean, it does, even in Miami, you can, people need blankets and all those good things. So
It's a nice
there's
gift.
always some purpose in knitting, even though it never gets really very cold here.
Yeah.
Nice gift to send someone. Yeah. I was just with my grandmother, and she just has this I guess, how would you explain? It's like a square almost. It's red and it's knitted, but it's for you to place your dishes when they're wet to dry.
Oh, really? That's a new
I
one.
can't hear you. It's great, actually. So
Dish rack,
Huh.
something that you can
Yeah.
place dishes that you've hand washed on top, and it's thick, so there's enough space that air gets underneath through the stitches, and so you just dry your dishes on the counter.
another great way to use
Oh,
it.
I think that's amazing. That's new. I've never heard that before.
Well, she's
Wow.
had it for 40 years, so it's it stood the test of
It
time.
doesn't-
Yeah, it goes to the dishwasher. It's great.
Yeah, that's
Good,
a good,
washing.
because the thing is that wool, especially if it's wool, and it probably is pure wool if your grandmother's had it 40 years,
It's
it
actually
will absorb the water, you see. It will absorb its own weight in liquid, in water. So it's, it's a self-drying thing almost.
I'm on my last one.
really
Okay, show us how you finish then, James.
So what you do is you put it through, and you pull it through as if like it's a stitch. But
Yeah,
that's probably the better way. I just cut it,
yeah, that's what I did. I did cut it,
and,
yeah.
and then I pull it like that, and that's it.
Oh, I see. You just kind of disconnect that last stitch. You pull it.
Yeah.
Oh,
pretty-
well, either
That was
way.
great.
Good job.
Yeah.
That looks awesome.
James is really quite the knitter.
So yeah.
Wow, that's
I
amazing.
think James could do the whole class. Come on, he's really good at explaining as well. So many years you said that since I learned how to do it, I think it's really hard when you've just automatically did it for years and years. Well, James is good because he, you still recall how you were, sort of people taught you and you can pass that on, which is really good. Yeah.
You both did a great job. All four of you and Donovan too.
Yes.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much. It's been so fun.
It's a lot of fun.
it's kind of, the thing is, it's nice with a knitting group. I was thinking, when one time when you're on vacation and we have a knitting group at the church, you'll have to come and join us because it's quite pleasant to be, social in knitting, not just sitting alone at home knitting, but to be with friends and, just knitting and talking. That's kind of pleasant too.
Yeah, it's great. I think we would definitely, especially when the church is built, that'll be so much fun.
Yeah, I think so. We could just, we could even have one like an evening or, something like you learned in the past, but why not, couldn't we have, just a multi-generational knitting group or something?
I love that.
I think that would be fun.
Yeah, it would be great.
Yeah,
thank you
so
all.
we'll put that on the list.
Thank you so much, Valerie.
Oh, my pleasure. It was
Yeah.
fun. You all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Julie also. And
I
Karen.
miss you all, so keep cheerful, and I'll see you soon, I hope.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, knitters.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.